Hey, this is Jon Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is artist and photo storyteller Jeremy McKane. He is masterful at cramming loads of life and human emotion in a finite moment into a single frame. And what makes his work even more interesting is that he loves the ocean. He loves water. He loves the life it gives and the way that it amplifies a story, focuses intention, and ratchets up the sense of what's important right now. He creates beautiful works that include marine life and people enjoying the ocean, often children, whose relationship with water seems more precious and more sincere. Jeremy is also a technologist and the founder of Ocean, a blockchain platform with a mission to protect 30% of the world's oceans by 2030 by reducing the cost of enforcement and defining financial value of the ocean's resources, by enlisting data and technology firms to quantify the populations, the temperatures, and other data sets in various parts of the world's oceans. The Ocean platform enables developers to collaborate with others around the world to improve conditions everywhere. Now, we've had frogmen, free divers, and seafarers on this show, and it's great to have Jeremy on to tell us about his work protecting and conserving that environment for all of humanity and all of the life in, under, and dependent on the sea. This episode is co-hosted and co-produced by our friend Sandra Ponce. She's always great, and she cares deeply about using the advances in technology we see across industries in all of the smartest ways. And if you care deeply about podcasts and great content that makes you smarter or better, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating and a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to the Break It Down show. Nothing big, just a few words. And most of all, share us with your friends. You know, the ones who love the ocean, who love stories and storytellers, and who would love to have their ear holes filled with stuff that makes them smarter and more interesting at parties. And now, joining Pete and Sandra, here's the most interesting guy at any party. Our guest today, Jeremy McKane.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hi, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is Jon Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey everyone, this is Jeremy McKane, and I'm here on the Break It Down show. I'm the president and CEO of the Ocean Currency Network. So thank you guys for having me.
And now, the Break It Down show with Jon Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, this is great. I've got, this is sort of a Popping the Bubble Redux with Sandra co-hosting with me. And so we don't get enough chance to hang out and chat, Sandra, but this is always great to do. And I know you're passionate about the ocean. I also am passionate about the ocean. I actually have another ocean guy coming on next week, a guy named Kaj Larsen. And so he does a lot of photography in the ocean of his diving. He's a former SEAL. But now today we have Jeremy McKane on and talking about his, I guess, your path from artistry into the Ocean Currency Network. Actually, I'm going to kick it over to Sandra to let her do a little bit of talking too.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Pete. It's so great to be on the Break It Down show, and I've missed our conversation. So really awesome to have me on as a guest. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to talk to Jeremy because we've had several conversations over the course of the last few months, and he is an ocean warrior that leverages the power of art and technology to make positive impact for the ocean. So excited to hear all about what you're up to, Jeremy. I guess, a great place to get started would be, you talk about yourself as an artist, and I've seen some of your incredible artwork that's available on Instagram at Jeremy McKane. But, talk about your journey from artist to now ocean activist.
Yeah, and thanks for saying that. I mean, I will say that as an artist, like, that's the one thing that you always cringe about. You're like, you always make these things and they're beautiful to you and you like them, and sometimes you hate them, but you put them out there anyway, and then you're like, oh crap, is the rest of the world going to like this? And then sometimes you just let that go. So it means a great deal to say that you like it. So thank you.
I love it.
Yeah. So it was a really weird, strange kind of turn of events. I was always, as a kid, passionate about the underwater world. And I remember being a little boy and thinking, gosh, I just wish that I could just be a scuba diver as quickly as possible. And so what ended up happening out of all of this was I did end up going to be a scuba diver. I loved doing it, but I wanted to spend more time down there. And the more time that I spent down there, the more I felt like this was my home. And there was just so many beautiful things. And that just kind of transitioned into art. And I love the juxtaposition of humans in the ocean, because I feel like sometimes when we look at really amazing footage, like from Blue Planet or, Planet Earth or any of these like really cool things that we can all think of on the top of our heads, we look at these amazing like natural things. And we don't always put the human context in there. But, it's almost like it's us versus them. We go to the beach, we see this line called the horizon, and that's usually where some people stop because they feel like there's bigger things in the ocean to get them. But the truth is, there's so many cool, magnificent things there. So how could I juxtapose those two? And that was kind of the basis for my artwork. It was a little naive. It was like fantastical, right? Because it's like you're always thinking about these beautiful things, but really the reality kept striking out. I would be in these really remote, beautiful places. Yeah, and then out of nowhere, you'd see a plastic bottle. You'd see a turtle that's got plastic. Once I saw it was like some grocery store bag that was on a sea turtle. And it's like, well, what do I do? I'm in Hawaii. I'm supposed to not touch the turtle. Do I take the plastic off? Do I leave it alone? Will I be fined? And there's all these like things that started to kind of really bother me. So I thought, well, somebody should do something about this. And then I did nothing with it. And I remember being in this really super remote place in North Queensland, Australia. And it was 900 Ks from any civilization, basically. But the evidence of mankind was everywhere. I mean, we're talking about, and this is no exaggeration, but you would go to the beach and there would just be these large chunks of like scuba diving tanks, flip-flops, clothes. You're like, how did these things get here? And the crazy thing was I couldn't even find a pair of flip-flops. I'm meaning one for the right foot and one for the left foot. It was always all right or all left. And I don't understand how that works. I'm sure there's some science somewhere that can explain that. But then it became really evident to me that's like, well, wait a second. Like, I'm creating art. I have a platform to talk about this stuff. And whereas I can go on any stage and give you all these factoids and figures about the oceans and why we need to protect them, that's just my idea conveying to the masses. But when we create art, then that's something that you see. It's something that becomes something for you. It becomes our idea. Mm-hmm. And I think so that was kind of the natural progression for the art, and kind of using art to be able to talk about the issues of conservation as it comes up with the oceans.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so from the art, the transitioning, seeing that art is this powerful medium to activate and instill a desire in people to, actually make change. So how did that transition happen? What was the next step for you?
Yeah, I at the moment, at that time, I was just kind of like winging it because I didn't know really what I was doing. I looked around and I could see some people trying to do some things. What I saw was a lack of unification, and I saw that as a huge problem. But then I saw like a couple groups that were doing really cool things. The first one that I took note of was Take 3 Australia. And I thought they had the best message. It was Tim Sky by the name of Tim Silverwood that started it. And the best, they explained it is like, if you go to the beach and you see rubbish, just pick up 3 pieces at least and put it in the bin. And it's like, well, you don't have to be a rich guy. You don't have to donate any money. You just have to be a human. And I thought, what a powerful message, because it wasn't asking for a whole lot of money. And then that kind of transcended other things. Then I started meeting other people that had of like mind. And I thought, well, how can we kind of unite these things? So I felt a little, guilty, because here I am making these artworks about beautiful things in the oceans. And I'm talking about also the bad things. But there's really no action attached to it. It's just a lot of talk, a lot of noise. And that was kind of why I kind of went back to the drawing board. So we have to create something that we can build to fix some of the issues or to offset some of the issues that we're seeing. And so that's where the Ocean Currency Network started that. And the idea was it was all out of ignorance. I was all out of art, but I would ask marine biologists, like, hey, how do these marine protected areas, how do you know that they're doing their job? And oftentimes they say, well, we do this, we do that, and we guess this, we guess that. And they were all really smart guys. And they've been doing this for a long time, but it was really low resolution, low frequency data. How can we convince the public that we need to protect more of the waters if we can't give them adequate data? And so that put me on this quest. And so now, without going into too much detail, we'll have time to do that. But we're building these really cool tools that can analyze life below water and analyze, not just what kinds of life, but what, we can say, how often are they coming in here? What, we're looking at the genomes of an individual species that kind of come through the waters. This is through a partnership that I'm doing with the Gurgis Laboratory at Harvard University. Just really crazy stuff. And all of this technology is out there. And now it's a matter of points of intersection. How do we put all these things together? It's like going to the grocery store. I don't know the first thing about baking a cake, to be quite honest with you, but I know there's a recipe out there somewhere. I can follow somebody's, footprints, and then I can go to the store and I can buy the ingredients, and then I might have some resemblance of a cake. I'll taste it a couple times. It'll probably suck, but through trial and error, I might have a decent cake pretty soon. And I think that's kind of how we're looking at a lot of the technology, especially the innovation around the ocean space at the moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You also touched on pollution being, one of the greatest threats to the ocean, but there's others like climate change and acidification. Have you seen, you're obviously very immersed in the space that, what are the things that are exciting in terms of positive innovation, positive technologies for the ocean that you've seen that can address any of those critical issues that the ocean is currently facing? I
would say, to answer that question, I would probably say that we need to kind of reflect back on us first. As I get older, one of the jokes that I have with people is I say, I know how I'm getting older by how many doctors I have. It used to be I only had one doctor. But when we have a problem with our bodies, we say, oh gosh, I've got this thing where I'm allergic to this nut or something. We talk to the doctor, and he treats that one symptom. But how often do we look at the entire body to figure out why that allergy happened in the first place? I think the oceans and climate change are intrinsically connected. We can't separate them. We can't say, because essentially what climate change is, it's a symptom. It's a symptom of something. I live in Texas, and believe it or not, there's a lot of people that want to do things for climate change, but there's still some really smart people that don't believe it. They feel like it's a natural cause, and maybe it is on some levels, but at the same time, we also have to face the fact that we are exacerbating the problem tremendously. Mm-hmm. And so how do we go back and look back at us, at our culture, and say, well, what can we do to offset so that we treat the actual core problem and not the symptoms of? So when I look at technologies and I look at concepts, what I think is really great is the folks who have taken the time to do their research, go back to indigenous cultures, because they've been doing this for thousands of years, and it's been working. But we came along with our really cool technology and our flashy things, and we found a way to do it better. It was almost like we're the lost boys of Never Never Land, and we just decided to do everything our way, and it's not working. So the status quo is broken, and so that's now why we need to fix it. But as far as technologies that are out there, I love the guys. It's the Seabend project. I think what they're doing it's great. I think concepts that are looking at that, but I also think like when we draw back to like what Five Gyres, for instance, fivegyres.org, a guy by the name of Marcus Erickson started that. They're actually focusing on the culture. They're focusing on the culture and the unification of everyone. So I think if Marcus was here right now, can't speak for him, but I feel like he would say to me, the biggest issue when we talk about plastic pollution is that the advocates for plastics are crazy organized, they're crazy funded, and they're united. But the conservationists are just all over the place, like a bunch of chickens with their heads cut off, with the exception of a couple few. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like, if we want to make it a massive impact, it starts internally, and then we can start to look physically on how we can unite each other's efforts. So I don't know if that really answers your questions, but I feel like it all starts with culture.
Right.
Hey, this is Pete. Real quick, I just want to let you guys know we are proud to announce our official support of Save the Brave, a certified nonprofit 501c3 with a charter of helping veterans with post-traumatic stress. Here's how you can help. Go to savethebrave.com, click on the link on the website, and my recommendation is this. Subscribe. Give them $20 a month. You've got subscriptions that you can turn off right now that you're not using that are $20 a month. Swap that out. Get involved. Let's help these folks out.
So I don't know if that really answers your questions, but I feel like it all starts with culture.
Right.
Do you have a sense for the problem internationally? I mean, obviously the water collects the plastic, but we do a pretty good job, I'm not saying great, of gathering our own plastic and doing something with it, especially compared to, like, I've been to Djibouti, and let me tell you something. They have no program. Yeah, their recycling is throwing something on the ground and walking away from it. So I'm all about reduce, reuse, Reese Witherspoon, but how do we do compared to how do we do to other places?
Yeah, so I think, when you mention America in specific, or the United States, we do a very good job at collecting our plastic, and essentially, it doesn't go into the waterways and all these kinds of things as it does in some other countries. The caveat is that essentially what we do is we package it up and we ship it to China. Well, it turns out China doesn't want it anymore, so now we have to come up with another solution. Thus going back to, this is also kind of the thing that I often say is like, well, that Indonesia and Southeast Asia and China, they're the biggest contributors to ocean plastic. This is a fact, but it also is a fact that we're shipping all of our crap to them. So at the end of the day, what we need to do is not point fingers at other people and realize that there's 7.7 billion crew members on Spaceship Earth, and we all play a role. So I think, you're right. The United States has amazing waste management tools. The question that I have for those in power in the United States is, what are you going to do with the trash to make it closed loop, full cycle? There are really cool technologies like pyrolysis that convert plastics into basically fuel. It can be refined into Jet A, it can be refined into gasoline, diesel, kerosene. The danger I have with that goes back to culture. If I think that there's some 9-year-old kid that's going to be sucking plastic out of the ocean, then it's going to absolve me of responsibility, saying, well, he's this little boy is going to just figure it out. I say that facetiously because it seems like every time we talk about
you're talking about the ocean. You're making a reference to the Ocean Cleanup Project.
I am. And it's because every time it's brought up to me in passing by somebody that doesn't know anything about the Ocean Cleanup Project, it seems like he gets younger year by year. And whatever that process is, I want that because I want less doctors. I think that looking back into that, I think is an issue. But but yeah, you're right. I mean, I look at my own city. And I look at, there's blue bins everywhere. There's recycling. People are mindful of recycling. But what they don't realize is that 92 to 93% of everything they put in that blue bin does not end up recycled. So what happens is, what I fear more than anything, and Dr. Sylvia Earle says it the best. If she was here, she would say that. She says, we have to give people hope, and we have to innovate, because when there is no hope, the only thing left in our hearts is apathy. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we truly cannot afford.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are beautiful words by Sylvia Earle, who is a legend in the ocean conservationist circles. And she's been doing a lot of work with developing hope spots around the world, which are protected marine areas. So it's awesome that you make a reference to her. But let's talk about a little bit more about, what you're doing, with the Ocean Coin and the other initiatives that you have that are aimed at actually making the kind of positive impact that our oceans need.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Well, I mean, I created the Ocean Currency Network right around in the heyday of like all the blockchain crypto stuff that happened. Like, I say the heyday, which is really that far ago. It was like 2017, 2016. But, I came from a world in the .com era where people were spending ridiculous amount of money on really stupid concepts, and you get these ridiculous valuations. And I saw the same thing happening in the crypto space, and I didn't want to be in that crowd. So we decided we wanted to build something that was tangible. We didn't want to do what the rest of the flock was doing. So two things was, how do I incentivize people for doing things? That's obviously the basis of being able to kind of pay somebody in easy. But that can be done with PayPal. It can be done with anything else. There's no real cool technology there. Where I saw an issue was this unification that I spoke of earlier. There's all these different concepts of how we gather data of the ocean. How do we know whether a marine protected area is actually doing its job? But how do we share that data? Sometimes this data sits on hard drives on NOAA boats, and you can have access to it, but you're going to have to wait. So here's where that low frequency thing comes into play again. It's frustrating for scientists. It's frustrating for citizen scientists and, artists that want to do cool stuff with that data. So I kind of, like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. I kind of went back to the drawing board and said, well, what would I do if I wanted this? Right about this time is where I ran into Dr. Peter Gerges at Harvard University. And he was like talking about these really cool things that cost $15 and $20 to get data out of the ocean. I was like, man, this is awesome. And the best part about it, he left it open source. So then I kind of took a chapter out of his book and I said, well, what if I created a system that actually wrote this data to a blockchain, an immutable source, so we could look at, temperatures, we could look at, plastic particulation, we could look at the types of fish, we could use Google's TensorFlow to be able to analyze video footage on the spot and actually say, oh, there's a shark, or there's a black tip reef shark, or so on and so forth. And we could get more complicated as time goes on as we train the machines. But this data, these systems could be applied to people, and we can start to get this immutable source of ocean data. start to get a really good understanding. Because if we understand at high frequency, high resolution, what's happening to our oceans, if there's a problem with, say, oxygen levels in a certain part of the Gulf of Mexico, before it becomes a catastrophe, we might be able to do something to prevent it. It's the whole reason why we have a weather system right now, right? Mm-hmm. We have satellites that are analyzing, water vapor and all these other kinds of things. And we're able to save lives because we can predict tornadoes. There's sirens, there's all kinds of things. I wanted to do something just like that for the oceans because I felt like following up after some major catastrophes have happened is not a really good way to maintain things. And so in this kind of process, different people would kind of pop up. One of them was Chandler Griffin from iSenses, and they're the ones that make our drones for us. And so what Chandler did was he took a jet ski and completely revamped it and made it like this autonomous board. It's a jet ski. It runs like a jet ski, has a top speed of 60 knots on open water, but it also has radar. It also can run in an area autonomously. It can patrol areas, especially marine protected areas. And so what I saw in that particular deal was I was like, I can actually this can be a dual purpose. I could do scientific studies, and then I can also help these sovereign nations enforce the protections of their marine protected area. So the Mako is what it's called, and one of the things that can be used for, we're going to do some trials in Jamaica. They're our first country we're working with. We'll analyze their marine protected area, and we'll take samples. And what we'll be doing at the moment is we're gathering water samples out of the ocean, and then we send those samples at the moment to the lab. And we look for different types of genome markers, basically. We're looking for, we have this database that says, if we have this combination, then we've got a tuna, we've got a shark, or whatever. What I want to do is I want to somehow come back and determine, okay, you know what? In this water at any given time, based on a whole subset of data, we've got X amount of tuna. Let's say we found, 100 tuna, and those 100 tuna were worth, let's just call it $10 million. Now I have a financial marker to these assets underwater, and I can cross-collateralize those assets. And then let's say that all of a sudden, Sandra decides that she's going to come fishing in these waters. And all of a sudden, this Mako stops doing scientific studies, broadcasts over channel 16, you have entered an area that is a protected area. You have 10 minutes to leave. If you don't leave, it sends you another warning that you're about to be arrested. The Marine Police and or Navy will be on their way. If you refuse to go, it will tell you, you're arrested. And if at that point you try to run, we have a system that can disable your vessel. And I don't want to get too public on exactly how we disable vessels, but we do this because we want to be able to give these sovereign nations autonomous enforcement tools that doesn't put human lives in risk.
Yeah, because those pirates and the people that are engaging in this illegal fishing activity in these marine protected areas, can imagine, are quite heavily armed and kind of dangerous, sketchy folks.
I think those are the people that we hear about in the news, right? Because that's the most, that's the stuff that makes the stories. The truth is that the people that you have fishing in these areas that are protected, well, they're people like you and I that are just trying to provide for their families, and so this is also part of this equation. How do we protect more of the ocean? Right now, we protect very little of the ocean. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 7%. But at IUCN in 2016, over, again, I don't know the actual numbers, but I know it was well over 130 nations and 600 NGOs basically said that, we need to protect 30% of the world's oceans if we're to push the needle back in the opposite direction. Well, how do you do that? And also ensure that these people that live in these areas have an economy that they can support their families on. It's like it goes back to this whole analogy of the body. We're treating one part of it, we're not thinking about the whole thing. And if you want to get really specific, Cyril Gooch from Parlay for the Oceans, he says, plastic is a design failure. Same problem, right? We say, hey, well, we can use this. It'll help us with our bottom line. It'll help us with things being clean. But we didn't actually design what happened on the end of use of that thing.
Right.
So what we want to do is we want to say, okay, cool. Now we know what's inside of these waters. Can we create a new asset class and a new financial model to where we can help incentivize other projects on the island where these folks could now work? So now we're talking about reintroducing new economies in places where we're having to remove them because we're trying to let the ocean regenerate.
When it comes to trying to manage these big problems, you have the problem of siloing, right? Like I've got friends that are working on ocean cleaning from their own point of view perspective. And I would imagine that these things can cross over in a way that isn't advantageous. So we had a while back, we had Dr. Stephen Running, who I'm hoping to grab again in a couple of weeks. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winning climatologist, and he talks about certain basic things we can do. But one of the problems is there isn't an overriding global body that really has the enforcement capability. You can sign a treaty, but that doesn't mean that, like you were saying, the person who's going to go out and make money for their family taking some tuna home, can't really stop that person effectively. I also want to ask about the app that would shut down a boat. Is that not dangerous for the pirates in the area? And are we putting them at risk by having a dead stick of a boat? But let's get to that a little later on. So how do we deal with the siloing and the lack of global authority to get some of these things done? Because I know, for example, the United States is not going to bow to an unelected body. We've said that over and over again for 200 plus years.
Yeah, this is where I think gets kind of like almost a sci-fi conversation, right?
Yeah,
because this is where I see, private individuals and private corporations working with machines to be able to take over. I know that sounds scary, but I do think that there can be this harmonious balance between the two. I certainly, for one, don't want to be floating around on ominous territory looking for bad guys, but I can train machines to do that. I, for one, don't want to be diving down counting fish, but I can train machines to do that. So I think there's a balance there that, and I think we're still learning what that balance is actually going to be. I mean, we still have yet to do some pretty heavy field tests, but we'll know answers to that pretty soon.
Yeah, the field test for the Mako will be happening. When are you starting those?
Well, as soon as we get the funding for it. So if you know anybody that's ready to write a check, let's do this. That's really been kind of the drawback. We've built all the tech, and it's not just the Mako. We have other sensors that are gathering all kinds of different data. We also have like these green laser refraction systems that we can measure plastic particulate, and that becomes really interesting too, because now if we start to look at these data models and say, well, where's the plastic going? We already know kind of because of various buoys that are out there how the currents go, but where is the plastic sitting? What's the percentage? Because another misnomer, people believe that there's this mysterious trash island in between Hawaii and in California.
Right, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
It doesn't exist, not in the way
they say
it's
it's 4 times the size of France.
It's massive, but it's plastic soup. It's plastic smog. And so when we have misinformation because we're disjointed all over the place, it creates havoc, and it also the public starts to lose faith in any kind of positive movement forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so getting back to Pete's question and also some of the things that you've been touching on in terms of this fragmentation of people that are interested in making positive impact. How do we unite these groups that want to impact change in a positive way? What are the, and do you have, I'm giving you a question here, but what do you have going on that's meant to unite these fragmented circles of players?
Yeah, I think there's actually there's multiple groups around the world that are actually bringing people together. There's various different summits and those kinds of things, and I think they're doing really good. I'm going to a summit, here in a little bit. I'm actually in the airport, so if you hear background noise, I'm super sorry, but I'm at an airport doing this. But I'm going to speak at EQ in San Francisco, and we're going to have this little kind of eco sprint about the oceans and technology and what's happening in the space. But it's also kind of a breakout where we get to kind of rub shoulders with other people and say, well, what can we do together to make an impact? So there's that. And then I actually am the host of the Ocean Summit on Necker Island. And so we were super fortunate, my co-host Susie Amai and I, to be able to host 70 people from 10 different countries on Sir Richard Branson's home and in the BVI. I didn't know what to expect in the very beginning. I was a little worried that it was going to be like a fire festival because I made the mistake like days before watching that stupid documentary and then going and doing ours. But the cool thing was that Richard was there and the island was still there and the boats were still there and we didn't have all those kinds of problems. But when we got there, what was really interesting was we had people from all walks of life focused on one issue, and that was, what actions do we need to do, or what can we do to make some impact on protecting 30% of the world's oceans? And again, to quote Sylvia, because she was here, she said, well, that's a good start, but we need to protect it all.
Yeah.
but right now we're less than 10%. So we have some work to do. And so, now what we had is we had artists, we had entrepreneurs, investors, philanthropic, groups that said, well, here's how we would do it. And even Richard had said to me at one point, he's like, how did you get so many people here? And I was just like, I don't know. I'm a weird person and these people are super weird too. And I guess we just feel normal here. And he was like, well, he goes, weird is good. He goes, just keep it up. So I think that's what it's going to take to make some kind of impact. It's just bringing people together saying, hey, like we're part of one team. We're one group, and then the other part of it is that you need to take this ego of not necessarily individual ego, but organizational ego. That needs to go away because we have to realize we're floating around on the same rock in the solar system. Unless we all work together, nothing positive is going to happen. So I see that happening World Oceans Day at the UN. Mm-hmm. I see it happening now at COP25, which has now been dubbed the Blue COP. That'll be in Santiago, Chile, at the end of this year. So you're seeing groups from all over the world that are now kind of coming together and using their resources. And so it's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of, what was that book? It was I think it was Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point. And he talked about how you can invite 3,000 people, or you can invite 100 people that have access to 3,000 people. And you have much more of an impact. And I think that's kind of what's happening here is these little groups are amassing, kind of recognition and some kind of track record. And at some point I see them all kind of joining together to be, a really united effort, but it takes time and it takes a little bit of growing pains in order to get there.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
And at some point I see them all kind of joining together to be, a really united effort, but it takes time and it takes a little bit of growing pains in order to get there.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, so one of the things is we all get cause fatigue, right? I'm pretty passionate about PTSD and trying to keep my fellow veterans alive, but also I've got a friend that's got ALS. And so now I'm passionate about ALS and trying to help find at least, something to alleviate the speed of that disease. But I also love the ocean. And I also, and it's so it can be overwhelming, and Jeremy, sure. I guess what I'm asking is, I have more money than time, right? But I only have so much time. What do you want to say to, the standard person who's a millennial or middle-aged like I am, and they're like, they want to help, but I don't have time. I don't have that much money, but I do care. So is there anything I can do even on a small scale?
Yeah, well, so this is where this conversation gets really interesting, right? Because we all have one thing that we can do. We can stop using these products, and if there are things that are harming the environment, there are people who promote meatless Mondays, right? That's one thing that you can do for climate change. I try my very best to not use anything to go. This includes paper products because we have sometime in our head we think, oh gosh, as long as I'm not using plastic, paper's at least better because it biodegrades. Well, it does biodegrade, and when it does biodegrade, it creates methane, and methane is 25 times more potent. So it's all of these things are problems. So if we know this and now we're aware, we can actually do something. So right off the bat, we can say, well, how do we reduce our impact? And these are some ways. Try to the best of your ability not to use anything that's single use. That's an easy thing to do. Now we get into kind of a conversation like you run a podcast, right? You could make a feature once a week or once a month that's about the oceans or about whatever. So everybody has a different stage. And if they realize what their resources are, that conversation changes a little bit. I had a conversation with somebody who runs, I don't want to say his name because he may not want me to say, but he's like, Jeremy, he goes, I can write checks. He goes, well, anything that needs to happen, I can write checks. That feels kind of lame. He goes, what else can I do? And he has a television show. And it's not a documentary style television. I said, everyone that watches documentaries, they're already sold. But you have a sci-fi television show. Why not do a study about how some alien race destroyed their planet because they didn't take care of their oceans? Start to kind of work on those kinds of things. The reason why I'm answering your question this way is because there is no one way. This is not a conversation with the Dalai Lama. I can't make you one with the ocean just in one answer. But what I can tell you is that the first thing that we can do is we can start to look at what our impact is, what our stage presence is, and where we can go as far as impact from there. And to every person, it's different. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted the Ocean Summit, was because I knew I had all of these different walks of life. And it's been amazing to see the people that have come forward saying, hey, well, this is what I'm going to do. One of the guys, he owns a company. It's a flip-flop company called Harimari. His name is Jeremy as well, Stewart. And he's like, I hear that there's these microbes that I can use. I can make these like flip-flops that will, biodegrade when they hit water. And I was like, cool. So he's working on technologies to make a lesser impact on the environment. And I think when individuals do this, but more importantly, big corporations, then it becomes easier. And the reason why I say this is that, like, if I go to Starbucks, which is very rare, I do go every now and then. But if I go to Starbucks, I try to get a porcelain mug because I know I'm going to be there, right? That's how I can reduce an impact. But I actually didn't go to Starbucks to ask for a paper plastic lined cup, but they just give it to you because you just accept it. But you have a choice, you have a voice, and you can use it. So I don't know if I really answered your question. I try to do as best I could.
No, well, it's a hard question, right? Like, because cause fatigue is a real thing, and you really do only have some things, but those can be little things where it's easy to dismiss the little things. Like, you can make 100 decisions that add a little chip in the good favor, and then decide to, every time you drive the car, you mash the gas as hard as you can because you're in a hurry. And you're like, you just erased all of the good in that one, in that one moment, So it's, I struggle with it for sure. Cause I
think there's one word that sums it all up. It's best.
Yeah.
And your best is different than my best.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that we need to, we can't be comparing each other and being competitive in this space, because it does no good for the overall collective.
Yeah. And I think just to add, I love what you're saying there, about we all have our own stage. And I think that's just, everyone just should realize that they can make an impact not only within themselves, but within their circles, and that they can, put their superpowers. Pete, you have superpowers. I have superpowers, and put those superpowers to use for good. And so, yeah, that's definitely, we're so much in alignment with that. And, for me, it's really about, seeing these emerging technologies and companies that are developing, these positive impact technologies and helping them amplify their voice through marketing. So that's really, kind of where I went. And the other thing is that I've noticed personally is that, as I've become more aware and done more work in the space, and networked with more individuals that are, very conscious about their consumption habits, that it's also impacting me. Jeremy, you and I had a conversation about, not eating fish anymore. And I felt like with all the work that I'm doing with the ocean space, it was hypocritical of me to continue to eat fish that, are suffering from overfishing in so many areas. I may make an exception for something like a lionfish, which is an invasive species, or maybe oysters, which I know are farmed. but yeah, I'm just kind of seeing personally, I am taking those, small steps every day, not going and using the reusable cups, not doing the single-use plastic, and trying to reduce eat more vegan and more, have less meat in my diet as well. So, yeah.
It goes back to what we said about with the body analogy. It's like we're treating the actual core issue. We're not treating the symptoms. You mentioned fish. Overfishing is one of the greatest threats to the planet right now, more than anything else. And then follow that, I would say, potential threat that is on the horizon. A topic that actually came out of the Ocean Summit is deep sea mining. Mm. If we think climate change is a big deal right now, you haven't seen anything yet.
Tell us what deep sea mining is.
Yeah, so all of these really cool technologies that we're actually talking over right now, I got this really nice MacBook Pro, I got an iPhone next to me,
yes.
I've got a car with all kinds of really cool stuff inside there. They have these things that are needed to construct these things called rare earth minerals. All right, well, where do we get rare earth minerals? Well, we mine for cobalt to make batteries and lithium and all these kinds of things, typically in places that really need the money, and sometimes it's done with child labor and all kinds of really dark, ugly things. But then when we say, well, we should stop doing that, we shouldn't use child labor, we shouldn't, strip mine the land, we still have a demand. We still want our latest Apple products. So where do we go? Well, why not go to the sea? No one's down there. No one will know any different, And so there's these little things called manganese nodules, right? And they're super important. They have all these really cool, little animals that actually live on there next to these like hydrothermal vents and whatnot. And some of these areas are like 200 degrees Fahrenheit. They're really crazy hot. And it used to be, we thought nothing was down there. but it turns out it's like the most biodiverse area on the entire planet. And so what happens when we start ripping all this stuff out and destroying all of these, the ecosystems at the deepest part of the oceans are the least likely to adapt because they've relied on the same food sources and systems for hundreds of millions of years. And if we disrupt that, we have no idea what that is going to mean for us here on land.
So there's companies that are actually pursuing deep sea mining as alternative sources for their supply chains to create these products.
Yeah, I mean, like if I told you that you had a pond in your backyard and there was gold at the bottom, what would you do?
Let's get to digging.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there oil down there too? Keep drilling deeper.
Yeah. And you know, it sounds all great and on paper until you realize what maybe the long-term effects are. It's all about ROI, right? It's like, yeah, I can get some short-term gains and it'll be awesome, you know, but my long-term investment is not so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, right? Because you want that new iBook or you know, Tesla car or whatever it is, but you've got to scratch down a mountain or dig a hole in the ocean to keep meeting the demands. And then we take the used up resources that we have and sort of just put them back into the earth to do whatever they're going to do. And it's a real problem, like as we do the consumer thing to balance that. But there are some hopeful things though, like some Stanford PhDs just put out a paper talking about converting methane to CO2, which is, you know, a huge thing. So as we start,
even cooler than that is methane fuel cells that generate electricity.
Oh yeah, exactly right.
And you don't even need batteries.
So science is working on some of these problems, and hopefully there's enough money getting in to continue these kind of researches. And that's just two things with methane. Like if we can turn methane into something less harmful, then we're doing better. However, we still have to control our consumption of things, you know, and it's so easy to go out and buy, you know, and I can't blame
I'm sorry, but I hear Cyril Gooch in my ear from Parlay. If he was here right now, he'd say everything is a design failure. If you think about all the things we're talking about right now, it's a failure in design.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to the discussion of the circular economy. And I think then also, you know, really as a basis for that, you know, education. And I think, you know, what we're doing here, what you're doing, Jeremy, is, you know, getting the larger public to understand that, you know, they also need to change their consumption habits, but also, you know, make those demands of companies and corporations to create the packaging that will be biodegradable and dissolve in water and other types of, you know,
I think those are bridge technologies, though. Just while we're talking about that, because again, about this whole idea about you know, oh, hey, we've got this plastic bag that turns into, you know, food.
Right.
It's still absolving me of responsibility from doing the thing that I should be doing to begin with. You know. So I do. So
think is that a design failure, or what is that then?
I mean,
how would you classify that?
I don't think it's a design failure because I think it serves a point, right? I think that just like pyrolysis, converting plastic into fuel, like we can't expect everybody on the planet all of a sudden to just drive Teslas. That's unreasonable. And what are we going to do with all the petrol cars? Right?
My daughter holds Tesla stock, so I would like that to be the end game.
Well, of course. I mean, I think that, make no mistake, that is the future. But we're also sitting on 60, 70-year-old battery technology that's so stupid, right? We have better technologies, and if we can focus on those, it's that we don't have to be able to, you know, harm the planet the way that we are to make this, then that's a whole different story. But anyway, I digress. But
Jeremy, one of the problems with all of these things, though, right? Like we always believe in science, but we also know that science makes a lot of mistakes on its way to a better solution. So, you know, at one point we wanted to dry out the Everglades because that was, you know, we needed that land for people. And we do need more land for people. And we are creating more and more people. We talk about a problem with the environment. You know, we're a terrible environmental partner. And yet there are going to be 8, 9, 10 billion of us. And
stop breeding people.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, like how
that's true. I have a friend that's working on a film on that very topic, actually.
Can we be as draconian as to say we're going to cap the world population at 7.5 billion? Yikes. Scary.
Yeah. I look at me individually and I look at, I'm 42 now, and, I remember being 18 and knowing everything. And now I'm 42 and I know nothing.
Right.
And I think that collectively, as a human civilization on this planet, like I think we were the same thing. There was a period of time where we thought that, bloodletting was how we solved problems, and then we realized that that's probably not the best thing to do. And we started working on other things, but we learned. We learned from our mistakes. We attempted to go to space and we attempted to go to the moon several times. We had some failures, but guess what? We made it happen. We've got a space station now. We have now a commercial spaceflight company that's publicly traded. This is not possible without failure. And so if we are afraid of failure, then nothing is going to happen. But, Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
Get out there and take some shots.
Love it. And that's such an inspiring note to just share. I mean, and you are such a great shining example of that.
Thank you.
I think that, what you're doing is so inspiring. You too, Pete.
I love to steal compliments. It's one of my favorite things.
Jeremy, what's next for you? I know you're on your way to San Francisco. You've got the Ocean Summit coming up. What else do you have going on?
Yeah, so we're planning Ocean Summit 2, actually. And so actually one of the things that we're doing is, we're obviously if you hear, we're going to do this event on Necker, it sounds super exclusive. That's the opposite of what I wanted. I wanted inclusivity, So in fact, one of the things that we did is we had scientists and artists that would have never been able to go to a place like that last year, but we made it possible for those things to happen. So, we created this website, oceansummit.org, and we told people, like, if this is something that you feel like you can contribute in some way, then, put your information in there, tell us what you do, and let's figure out how we can work together, right? I'm working on that, and this particular year, we're going to do kind of some breakout sessions and stuff on Necker, and then we're going to go for a couple of days. We're going to go out in the boats. We're going to go to the various places in the BVI, work with the locals, the schools, and try to actually share with them what we're actually trying to accomplish globally, but start where we're having these conversations and seeing how we can help empower these communities as well. And then what I'm toying with the idea is I'm trying to gather as many like ocean innovators that I can find on the planet, right? And I think that there's a huge void in this space of like really rewarding these innovators for doing something amazing. Because a lot of times we don't really know about it, right? How cool would it be to have like this, awards ceremony for ocean innovators, right? That we're actually doing something. I've been to hackathons before. People have won lots of money for hackathons and then they just disappear. I don't know. I guess they just go to the beach. It's a totally different deal. But this is one of the things that we're actually planning right now is trying to figure out, who's in this space that's wanting to do some really cool stuff. And we're trying to put everybody together so we can all, because that's what it's going to take. Going back to that unification thing, we're going to all have to work together. We're going to have to set our organizational egos aside, because, and by the way, when we talk about protecting 30% of the world's oceans, we're not talking about forever. We have to give the oceans time to regenerate so that we can rely on it for hundreds of years after we're gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been shown that those marine protected areas, the fish come back, fivefold or more.
Yep.
So yeah, super important.
I went to the first Tappu it was the first Tappu in Fiji in the Lao group, and I sat down with the paramount chief, and he told me the stories of how they count fish and how they create these tapus. Tappu is a traditional word for forbidden or taboo, and when these areas are set, no fishing. You're not even allowed to go through there in most cases. But what they found is that these fish just regenerate and repopulate, and it's actually better. And they would go count fish and know when to release that Tappu. But somewhere along the line, we don't do it like we did in the old way. So, so I hope that we can kind of, use a lot of indigenous beliefs and knowledge and using kind of a modern spin on it to help kind of scale that up to multiple cities around the world and countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to learn from our elders and the civilizations that have been, working on the land and the oceans for thousands of years and generations. So, is there anything that we didn't get to touch on, Jeremy, that you wanted to give a shout out to or about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I talk about this stuff all the time. I feel like sometimes I bore people with the details, but I guess what I would say is like the one thing I would really like to leave everybody with is that if you feel empowered enough to want to do something, maybe you're a programmer, maybe you're a designer, maybe you have some cool talent. What can you do in this space? Can you do something where we can all benefit together? Maybe there's something that we can do to help you. It all starts with kind of bringing everyone together. And so I invite everyone to just say what you do at the Ocean Summit. I may never personally do business with you, but there might be other people inside this crew that would readily do business with you. And I think the more that we communicate to each other in kind of an open society, I really do feel that that's the first step for us to really unite our efforts.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. As always, it's been a fantastic conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you when you're out here in San Francisco. And Pete, thank you so much for having me on the Break It Down show. It's been super fun.
It's always fun to have a chance to co-host with you, Sandra, and I love pushing the narrative on things, especially if they make me uncomfortable. In this case, I love talking about the ocean because, it is a massive area for us to do work in. And Jeremy, I will offer you this. Let's talk about how to put my podcast to work for the cause, because
let's do it.
The one thing I do have surplus of is podcast awesomeness. So let me contribute some to your.
I love podcast awesomeness. Let's do that.
Well, but 100% serious. Let's keep in touch on that, and then we'll put this up and do all we can to support what you're doing because it's important.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you guys having me. This has been a real honor to be here with you guys.
Yes. Well, thank you, Jeremy.